Welcome to a new series where we take tech on the road, explore a travel destination, and test the gear out in real life. This is Field Tested. Hey folks, in my final episode of Field Tested for 2017, I'm taking the A7R Mark III to Lima, Peru and New York, summer and winter, to test it out and put it through its paces. Now the A7R series has been a hit from the beginning, offering high resolution, crazy dynamic range and great color depth. And with the original one also adding on-sensor stabilization and focus peaking, it opened up a whole new world for people to use their legacy glass or other brand glass on these bodies. The A7R Mark III adds even more refinements, mostly aimed at adding in pro features that people have been wanting and interface shooting experience things. So like all my field tested reviews, I'm gonna put this through the ringer, try it in all kinds of shooting situations and see if it crumbles or if it shines. Now, Peru is one of my favorite countries and Lima is an amazing town to visit. There's a surf culture, a beautiful beachfront, but one of my favorite places, perhaps in the whole world, is Parque Kennedy. On weekends, it fills up with older people dancing to Latin American music. And another reason I love this park, apart from the arts and crafts and great foods, its nickname is Cat Park because there are literally hundreds of cats wandering around and they're mostly cute and good-natured. I was fortunate enough to take along two A7R3 bodies on this trip, so most of the footage you're seeing, unless it's obviously a GoPro or from a drone, was taken with the A7R in 4K video mode. The first time I visited Parque Kennedy, there must have been 500 cats. The second time, 300. Last visit, there was only about 10. And this visit, I guess 50 to 100 again. I was worried that the council had finally kind of gotten rid of them, but it turns out there was a big adoption drive and a lot of them found homes. Doesn't stop some of them being a little bit cheeky and playing on the grass right under the sign saying not to. Okay, so some first impressions on the handling of this guy after my first few days of shooting with it. It's a big leap forward, really a significant jump over the A7R Mark II. The battery life is a lot better. I think if, there was one thing above all else that people complained about with the alpha cameras was the battery life. These new batteries, I'm seeing 2 to 3 times the performance, and a single battery is getting me through pretty much every day, even when I was doing some really, really long time lapses. Overall, the handling is great, focus is improved, but let's put the grip on and take it out and shoot with a model in the area of Barranco. Now, Barranco is a really cool artsy district, not too far from Miraflores, and another one of the more gentrified areas. Prices for real estate are really going through the roof there. It's a really nice area. You see a lot of couples wandering around on weekends, going to the cafes and restaurants. There's some beautiful old architecture and a great place to shoot.
Oh, ojalá un día fuera nuestra religión y todos anduviéramos a dejarnos bendiciones con besos y abrazos. También eso se supone que el camino hacia la vida Dios nos lo pone.
I met up with local model Sylvia and we shot in the park, outside some buildings in this beautiful pagoda area.
Oh, claro que sí, de la capital musical con el negro de San Juan. Yo trayendo rap, rap real. Oh, claro que sí, rap de conciencia para todos poder decir que sí, wow. Y sigo aquí haciendo así freestyle, aunque me quieran callar ahora, no lo puedan. Oh, claro que sí, porque esto es lo que hay, aunque quieran, aunque les cause ahora.
It's always fun to shoot with the Mavic, and we also shot in front of this graffiti wall, trying to find moments to catch a shot in between the passing traffic. Finally, we headed back to the beachfront at Miraflores and shot in this cool maze cutout that I thought offered a nice foreground and background for our images. Make sure you jump on over to mattgranger.com/field tested and you can check out different images, including raw files that I took with this in Peru. Lima has an amazing culinary scene. It's really impressive to see the quality of food coming out of this developing city. In fact, 2 of my 5 favorite restaurants in the whole world are located in Lima. First is Maido, an absolutely exceptional Japanese-Peruvian fusion. The second is the Alfredo, the best ceviche and carpaccio I've ever had in my life. Make sure you're following my World's Best Seafood channel because I have videos on both of them coming up very soon. Next up, I headed in for a walk around downtown. Beautiful historic old buildings and a couple of really nice plazas. If you ever get to Lima, definitely go and wander around. Great for street photography. My main point of coming into downtown though was to go to the central market. There's a load of markets or mercados spotted throughout Lima. The central one is huge and there's just so much to see, from all of the produce and the people. Loads of different birds. Most of them ready to serve, some of them still gobbling. All kinds of grains and legumes. And what a surprise, even more cats, including this cheeky one who chose to have a bath right above the sign saying no more cats in the market. Considering the amount of fresh meat and seafood that the market has for sale, I can see why they don't want cats there. Having said that, it was a handy place to pick up some cat food, which is what I used to attract the cats back at Parque Kennedy. The market is fairly dark, so it was a good opportunity to try out the high ISO performance of this camera. Let's take a look at some samples. These, along with others, are available to download at mattgranger.com/field tested. Overall, the performance is at least as good as the A7R3. For a super high-res sensor, I think you'll be satisfied with it, but it's not going to compare with something that's around 24 megapixels. Okay folks, trigger warning on this next segment. This is a little bit of mirrorless versus DSLR talk. The A7R Mark III is performing really well. The focus in particular is so much better than the 2, but it threw into sharp focus for me, an issue that I think is really inherent when you're switching systems or picking up any new equipment. And that's kind of, you could call it excitement or you could call it an investment bias. That once you've bought into something, you tend to focus on the positives and not the negatives if you're trying to convince yourself that you've made the right decision. Now, I think a lot of people on the early generation said that Sony was behind because the battery life wasn't great, they only offered 1 card slot, and the focus wasn't as good as a similarly priced DSLRs. I think they're all fair concerns, and I think they've made big efforts to address it in the Mark III. Now, dual card slot, much better focusing, and a much better battery life, more than double in my testing in terms of actual shots you're getting, close to 3 times as many. But it does make me wonder then, how much have we kind of overlooked? You know, I love the files I was getting from my A7R Mark II, so maybe I downplayed to myself the focus issue. On this trip, I've gotten shots that I would have missed with the R2 because it just wouldn't have pulled focus on the point of contrast that I needed in time before the moment was gone. So I think it does bear the question, you know, they're different, they have different applications in a sense, but there are people choosing between a camera like this or a camera like the Nikon D850, and I've felt there were times in low light focusing where this was still sluggish. So let's go back to New York, put it side by side with my D850 in low light focusing, and see which one's able to pull focus best. The high resolution of the A7R3 means that you can take a long time lapse and introduce movement in post because the frame is so much bigger than 4K. Almost as soon as I landed in New York, I got model Dominic in to do some test images in studio. Now, I've seen in the field the camera's handling well, but with this ultimate resolution, I wanted to see how the studio shots are coming up when I have a little bit more control over the scene and the light and everything that we've got going on. We shot a couple of different series here, indoors and outdoors. Again, make sure you go on over to mattgranger.com/field tested and you can download some raw files. Next up, I was shooting for a commercial client, actually filming with a Red video camera of a Taekwondo artist, a friend of Stephanie's. So we were filming away and I thought this would be a great opportunity to actually compare this to my D850 and see, is the focus actually better, worse, or similar? Now, it's hard to say definitively. Anecdotally, I can say I got more keepers in good focus with the D850 than I did with the Sony. But that absolutely could be because I'm so much more familiar with the Nikon system and I've got that tuned to exactly how I like to use it. One thing I did notice though, this having focus points all around the frame was really great for it to be able to track her, whereas the D850 you're still limited to that central section. Having said that, I found it did stick with her face a lot better. One point in favor of the Sony in reverse though was, I think we forget that even with a big bright viewfinder, the D850 has the biggest, brightest of any Nikon full frame camera. When you compare it to an EVF, I was going between one camera and the other, you realize just how dark that indoor gym is because the Sony was showing it at, you know, full brightness. So that was actually quite handy. Okay, let's do a side-by-side test, the D850 and the A7R3 to see how the focus is really doing. This morning, before sun came up, I set up a scene with a low contrast object, this lucky money toad thing, on a dark gray background, and then tried to focus on it. The Sony was hit and miss. There were two where it just couldn't focus, but it still took the picture. One where it said it was in focus, but it wasn't. And the rest it got. The background it could never focus on. There was just not enough contrast. This is turning the autofocus assist lamp off, which I find can be really distracting to a shoot. Now, the D850 got it every single time when I was shooting, you know, on the actual frog, but likewise, it couldn't focus on the background. There was just too little light and too little contrast. So again, it's going to, I can't say that's absolutely definitive, but I do think whilst the A7R Mark III focus is a world better than the two, it's not up to the level of the similarly priced DSLR like the Nikon D850. One feature that this camera has that I'm sure some people are really interested in and others maybe not is the pixel shift technology. Essentially, it'll take 4 images where it shifts one up, one down, one left, one right to just move by a single pixel, and then you can combine those 4 final images to realize one image with loads of detail. Now, this is really for still life, you know, maybe a bowl of fruit, a mountain, or a building where you can put your camera on a tripod because it can't move at all for that single pixel to be effective, and neither can your subject. So as a portrait and travel photographer who doesn't shoot a whole lot of mountain ranges, it's not something I'm personally going to use a whole lot. But if you are, then that could be really interesting. So I will take some samples and put them up at mattgranger.com/field tested where you can check them out. Now, Now, this is the last in our first series of field tests, and I have to give a huge thank you to our 3 sponsors who've made this series possible. First of all, Lens Pro to Go have been renting us gear for a long time, but for each one of these episodes, we've been getting our gear from them, and it's just made the whole thing possible. So thank you so much. They're really, really great to deal with. If you want to rent anything in North America, do check them out. Next up is Soundstripe. All the music we use in this series, we've gotten from them. You can get licenses, you get a membership that's either monthly or annual, and then you have unlimited access to their whole library, and they have a bunch of new stuff going up all the time, so definitely check them out. And finally, to Lutify.me. You know, if you're into video editing, you'll know all about LUTs. They have a great selection of different ones available, and they have some cool new stuff coming as well in the new year, so make sure you watch this space and check out what they've got on offer. Big thanks to all of them. Now, final conclusion on this camera. I really think you have to give it to Sony that they listened to the complaints that the customers had. Poor battery life, single card slot, you know, there was a couple of different issues with the cameras, and they've pretty much addressed it. It's not overheating, the battery life is now pretty good. Dual card slots, although only one of them is UHS 2, the other one is UHS 1. It's the same fantastic sensor, a great grip. It does all come at a cost. This is priced at the same as like a D850 or a Canon 5D Mark IV, but it's a phenomenal camera. You really have to think about how you're going to use it. Now, this may be a little bit of a bombshell for people, but I think looking back over everything we've done this year, I have to name this as my camera of the year. The A9 is phenomenal, but I think this is going to suit the needs of even more people. And for most shooters, this is a really well-rounded product. Their 3rd generation of the R resolution in their series, and I think it's going to make people really happy. I would say if you're shooting with the A7R2 and the focus, battery, and card slots aren't an issue for you, then just use it and love it. But if those 3 things in particular do bug you, this is a really, really worthy upgrade. And of course, you could rent it from Lens Pro to Go before you're buying. Links to all of our sponsors and all of that stuff is in the caption below. Let me know what you thought of this video and the whole series. Hopefully we can come back in 2018 with more of these. Thanks for joining us.